Welcome to a new series here on the channel called The Philosophy of, where we are going to jump into the philosophy and psychology of our favorite characters and stories. We are kicking off the series in a galaxy far, far away. Wind the clock back 20 years. It's May of 2005, and the world witnessed the premiere of Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith, the long awaited fall of Anakin Skywalker and the rise of one of the biggest bads in cinema history, Darth Vader. But how did we get here? This retrospective is going to take a look at the movie, but also the decisions that were made in the movie, how we got to this point, and really the trilogy as a whole, because I fundamentally believe that these are movies that have to be taken as a whole vision of what George Lucas was trying to accomplish with this prequel trilogy. This series of movies is divisive. You have a whole generation of people who say that this is their Star Wars. You have a whole other generation of people who say that these movies have totally missed the point of what the original trilogy sought out to do, and everything in between. I struggle to find a more divisive set of fans and a more opinionated set of fans than Star Wars fans. So, before we get into the series itself, we have to take a look at the man behind the vision. George Lucas grew up on stories of space fantasy and western and samurai films, and he wanted to craft a modern myth that would inspire kids. That's a big reason why the original trilogy focuses around an adaptation of the hero's journey, because he wanted audiences to be able to follow in the footsteps of a coming of age hero, somebody who was thrust into a world larger than themselves and forced to figure out what to do with that. You see, George Lucas is kind of a weird storyteller. He set his original trilogy in the midst of a larger narrative. He knew that things happened before this set of movies and things were going to happen afterwards, but he still persisted with this idea that he's going to start the story from the middle. And so we get 4, 5, and 6. And then from that point, he kind of threw the doors open to early content creators, at that time novelists, authors, who wanted to take this idea, this world that he had created, and expand upon it. And so we started getting the extended universe. But by the 90s, after the original trilogy had ended, Lucas was ready to finally complete the circle and tell the origin story of Darth Vader and the fall of the Republic. Pieces that were put in place and hinted on even from episode 4 and throughout the entire original trilogy. And so the prequels had to serve as this ambitious end of the grand vision, but really the start of what would go on to be this beloved trilogy of movies that at this point had been around 20 plus years and had become this phenomenon. And so he sets out to complete the vision and start a story at a new place while ending the story in a predetermined endpoint, because we know that the end of this trilogy has to end on a down note, because we pick up in 4 with the Galactic Empire. The Emperor rules everything with an iron fist and this menacing figure by his side. But where does it come from? And how do we get there? Revenge of the Sith was a story that Lucas had been waiting to tell for literally decades. The saga's darkest chapter, but also one that would complete his modern myth. And it carried the emotional weight of the entire saga, including the originals, on its back, with the film having to show Anakin Skywalker's fateful fall to become Darth Vader, the destruction of the Jedi Order, the rise of the Galactic Empire, and the shattering of the friendship and connection between Anakin and Obi-Wan that the stage had been set for even from the 70s. So, how do we get to this film that bridges the gap between the hopeful ending of The Phantom Menace and the grim beginning of A New Hope, explaining how the Republic became the Empire, how beloved characters like Padme and the Jedi Knights could vanish from the world stage, and how the twins Luke and Leia were born and hidden, with the screenplay managing to hit all of the marks in a brisk 140-minute thrill ride? Well, for that, we have to go back to episode one, The Phantom Menace. This movie is a tonal departure from what fans knew Star Wars to be. That's why this movie was so divisive when it hit. And thankfully, through the lens of history, has come to garner a fan base, has become an appreciated entry into the Star Wars canon. And part of why I love the books in the extended universe, and why I particularly am a Legends guy, is a lot of that material is what flushes out how we actually get to the point of Star Wars Episode 1. What led up to the point where the Republic is in full swing, the Jedi Order as we know it in Episode 1 is in full swing, and we get to see that world fully fleshed out. But when we get to Episode 1, the Republic is in decay. Though it presents itself as a democratic institution, it's paralyzed by internal contradictions. Say the Trade Federation's blockade of Naboo is technically illegal, but the Senate does nothing about it. Corporate entities like the Federation hold immense influence, illustrating how special interests can hijack democratic institutions. This is where we enter Palpatine, who plays the situation with cold precision by advising Queen Amidala to push for a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum. He engineers his own rise. The real brilliance is that Palpatine uses the Republic's procedural dogma against itself. Rather than a violent overthrow, he begins the quiet subversion of the system from within. The film sets the stage for a larger political narrative that democracy doesn't fall in a giant blaze, it erodes from within when its ideals are no longer matched by its practices. Anakin is introduced as this hopeful, generous kid with a gift for mechanics and flying. His early psychology revolves around attachment to his mom, to his freedom, to the idea of helping others. He wants to be a Jedi because he believes that if he is a Jedi, then he can come back and free everyone and set everything to how he thinks it should be. These qualities make him sympathetic, but also fragile. He's desperate to belong. He's desperate to matter and feel like his voice is heard. The Jedi sense his potential, but fear his emotional volatility. The response? Deny him training. Then reluctantly accept him under the label of dangerous. See, he grew up hearing about how he was the chosen one, but he also grew up hearing about how he was dangerous. The contradiction here is staggering. They take him in, but they isolate him emotionally. Palpatine, even in this early stage, begins shaping Anakin's worldview. He plants seeds that Anakin is special, that he's misunderstood, that he's destined for greatness. This emotional grooming starts in childhood, establishing Palpatine not just as a political player, but as a psychological manipulator and mastermind who understands Anakin better than the Jedi do. By the time of the prequels, the Jedi Order is hollowed out from within. It's detached from the people that they claim to serve. They operate more like an elite religious bureaucracy and army than a spiritual guide or peacekeeping force. They've replaced wisdom with procedure, institution with doctrine. They view emotion, particularly attachment, as a path to the dark side. But in doing so, they neglect emotional intelligence. Rather than helping Jedi understand their feelings, they teach them to suppress them. This denial creates emotional repression across the order. Their complacency also stems from their long standing role as allies of the Republic. This is where the books come in, where you can see the progression of the Jedi Order's relationship with the Republic and how they became basically an arm for the government, stemming from a conflict with the Sith. And in a lot of ways, the Jedi have been preparing to fight that war again, not realizing that the rule of two had been right under their nose the entire time. They're fighting a war they don't even realize. They mistake political alignment for moral clarity. When the Republic begins to rot, they remain loyal to its institutions rather than questioning its direction. Their vision is clouded, literally and metaphorically, because they've grown too comfortable, too convinced of their moral authority. See, here's the thing about George Lucas. He was always a political voice. His political commentary is so evident in all of his works. This film and this series of films is a culmination of George Lucas's work as a filmmaker and, if I may say, some of his finest work as a director, because there's this larger narrative that's being displayed across 1, 2, and 3. One of the things that baffles me is that George Lucas is often debated as a political filmmaker, but look at his filmography. It's always included societal commentary. And this series is no exception, with its themes and messages still being relevant and impactful today. Lucas's films, including American Graffiti, voiced anti authoritarian and anti establishment views, reflecting the counterculture of the 60s, with the good guys often being the rebels using asymmetric warfare against a highly organized empire. The original trilogy was a commentary on the Vietnam War, as well as a sweeping space epic of good prevailing over fascism and evil. While the prequels brought more specific ideas to the forefront, encompassing a wider scale of fascism. The prequels interrogated specific structures and systems like trade and capitalism, the ceding of political power towards a dictator, and the deconstruction of how democracy becomes whittled away as people try to find a middle ground with fascism. Revenge of the Sith, in particular, was a post 9/11 piece coinciding its fictional war with the start of the Iraq War and was George Lucas's most specific and pointed Star Wars film from a commentary perspective targeting fascism and projecting the future born from the Patriot Act. In The Revenge of the Sith, the Empire creates a boogeyman in the Separatists, justifying his takeover and preys upon the exhaustion of the people to create a new boogeyman in the Jedi, demonstrating a cycle of scapegoating to maintain control, leading to the downfall of the Republic and the rise of the Empire. The original Star Wars establishes the idea of the Clone Wars, which becomes a significant plot point in the prequels. We pick up with episode 2 and we see the beginnings in the formation of the Clone Wars with Attack of the Clones. The separatist movement, led by Count Dooku, fractures galactic unity, but it's all theater. Dooku is a former Jedi turned Sith apprentice under the control of Darth Sidious, who is Palpatine. Even though the Jedi have been introduced to this new era of Sith in the first one, they still have a hard time wrapping their mind around the idea that there could be more than one, that this could be the Sith, because when you look at Dooku rivaled Yoda as a swordsman. And they had a hard time wrapping their mind around the fact that there could be someone who would rival Yoda, because if Dooku was the apprentice, that means that there was somebody stronger. And the Jedi couldn't see past themselves enough to accept the fact that they had allowed the fox into the henhouse. The war is fabricated to justify the expansion of emergency powers and the militarization of the Republic. The Jedi fail to detect the deception. They've even led troops into battle, abandoning their original role as peacekeepers. This marks the beginning of their complicity in the Republic's collapse. They come to find out that there is a clone army that has been sanctioned by Master Sifo Dyas. The clone army, conveniently ready just as war breaks out, should be a red flag. Instead, it's welcomed as a gift. Throughout this movie, we have Anakin. Anakin is no longer innocent. His psychological trajectory now focuses on control over love, life, and fate. His relationship with Padme is intense. It's rooted in a fear of loss. He's reintroduced to this woman that he met as a kid and has basically obsessed over her. He has attachment issues and he's never been taught how to process those attachment issues into healthy relationships. And so he has all of these feelings that he has no idea what to do with. Then you couple the fact that his force abilities are showing him these visions of the death of his mom, this love that he's known, this attachment that he's known, and he feels powerless to do anything about it. And he gets there and he's too late. And we see the first steps of his path to the dark side, where he slaughters the entire encampment of Tusken Raiders that kidnapped his mom and tortured her. And she dies in his arms and he loses it. And the Jedi do nothing to help him. They are of no help because they themselves are emotionally repressed and have taught him to be the same way. His secret marriage to Padme is a rebellion against the Jedi's doctrine and political order. His mother's death is a breaking point. He murders the entire village of Tusken Raiders, not out of duty, but pure vengeance and retaliation. And it doesn't horrify him, it empowers him. This moment is pivotal. He tastes what power unchecked by morality feels like. And the Jedi, they still fail him. They preach detachment while sending him to war. They suppress emotion rather than help him channel it. Caught between the Jedi's denial of emotion and Palpatine's indulgence of it, Anakin drifts further from balance. During the Clone Wars, the Jedi's identity crisis deepens. They become generals, warriors, leading troops into battle. But this contradicts the core mission as peacekeepers. The war pulls them into politics, which further clouds their judgment. They begin to see themselves as indispensable to the Republic, mistaking utility for virtue. Their refusal to question the clone army's origin or ethics of their role in the war shows a profound loss of discernment. And yet they speak of balance while acting out of fear. They mistrust Anakin, yet constantly depend on him. They sense a threat in the Force, yet they can't identify it. The Jedi have lost their humility. Their arrogance blinds them to the fact that the enemy they seek is operating right next to them. The story explores how the desperate urge for power and control can lead to authoritarianism. The galaxy's state of war allows for the occupation to feel less out of place, and the fascism sweeping in is not noticed. Much like in the real world conflicts that we see, where once the war has started, it doesn't need to be constantly justified. The downfall of Anakin Skywalker is attributed to his emotional immaturity and entitlement, which are preyed upon by authoritarians like Palpatine, but also like the Jedi, who manipulate and weaponize these traits to gain control, as seen throughout the entirety of the prequel trilogy. This sprawling opera of tragedy and politics and the fall of democracy. The post 9/11 era is characterized by mass paranoia, violent state actions, and the erosion of civil liberties in the name of security, mirroring the themes present in the Star Wars saga, particularly in the transformation of Anakin into Darth Vader. Anakin's fate is sealed when he makes a deal with Palpatine, similar to the Faustian bargain, without considering the consequences, leading to a battle on Mustafar that ultimately destroys his connection with Obi-Wan and his allegiance to the Republic. The Clone Wars give Palpatine the pretext to centralize power. With Order 66, he not only wipes out the Jedi, but reframes them as traitors. The Senate, worn down by war and manipulated by fear, accepts the transition from Republic to Empire without much resistance. This is how democracy dies. Not with a bang, but a shrug. And that is frighteningly real. The people cheer as their freedoms are signed away, convinced that they're gaining security. Palpatine becomes emperor not in secret, but in full view of the public. The tragedy is collective, not just personal. See, I left episode 3 in theaters back in May with a chill down my spine because it was haunting to see just how real the themes contained in this movie specifically, but really throughout this entire trilogy, can be. Look around us and we see horrifying examples of authoritarianism and fascist behavior. And we look at the fact that it is very real to see around us that we can look at the fact that democracy is not bulletproof. Democracy is not a given and can be manipulated and eroded. Anakin's transformation into Darth Vader is a psychological implosion. He dreams of Padme dying and, unable to bear another loss, becomes obsessed with preventing it. Palpatine exploits the fear masterfully. He promises Anakin the power to stop death itself, making the dark side not an evil choice, but a desperate one. I encourage any of you that haven't already to read the Darth Plagueis novel because it happens as this is taking place, and it is a beautiful look into the creation of Palpatine and Darth Sidious, into the man that we see in the series. The Jedi's final error is political and personal. They attempt a coup against Palpatine, confirming his narrative of their treason. Anakin, caught in the middle, makes a fatal decision. He kills Mace Windu and submits to the Sith, rationalizing it as a way to save Padme, thinking that maybe he'll overthrow Palpatine once he gets the power to save Padme. But the irony is brutal. In trying to prevent her death, he causes it. His fall is complete. Not when he kills Jedi, not when he kills the younglings, but when he realizes he's lost everything and chooses to live as Vader anyway. He's no longer driven by fear or hope, but by guilt and rage. His psychology is no longer human. It's armor over trauma. The Jedi Order ends not just because of a betrayal, but because of a systematic failure. Their inability to adapt, their moral inflexibility, their disconnect from the people they claim to serve all contribute to their fall. When they finally act against Palpatine, it's too little too late. And done with the same lack of emotional awareness that plagued their treatment of Anakin. They try to eliminate him as a threat instead of confronting the deeper spiritual and systematic issues that enabled his rise in the first place. Their downfall is not just a tactical defeat, it's a philosophical one. They couldn't understand or process the full rage of human emotion. And so they failed to see the danger of trying to govern without empathy. Qui-Gon's death at the end of the first film forces the Jedi Council and Obi-Wan to take responsibility for Anakin's training, despite being ill-equipped to handle his situation. And Obi-Wan's approach to training Anakin is flawed, contributing to Anakin's ego and chip on his shoulder. Anakin's ego and sense of entitlement are further exacerbated by being told that he is the chosen one, and his inability to understand the world and let his emotions dictate his actions creates a recipe for disaster. The Jedi Order's practice of abducting children at a young age and indoctrinating them is also really problematic. But the discipline and structure it provides can be beneficial, as opposed to Anakin's lack of understanding and emotional control. The Jedi's hubris is evident in their dispassionate judgment of situations and their complicity in normalizing the authoritarian shift of the Republic that led to the rise of Palpatine and ultimately Vader, highlighting the importance of balance between emotions and objectivity. Anakin's downfall is attributed to that emotional instability and obsessive attachment. But his downfall is just as much a product of the Jedi because he's never taught how to process his emotions. He's never taught how to deal with his attachment issues. He's never given a safe place to try to become a whole person. The only person who's showing him an ounce of compassion, even though it is emotional manipulation, is the Chancellor. And so when Mace Windu attempts to arrest him, he sees the fall of the only hope that he has to save the woman that he loves. It is tragedy on top of tragedy. Padme's character is notable for her strong sense of self and her convictions, which she refuses to sacrifice even for the people that she loves, and her attempts to form a rebellion in the Senate to oppose the Emperor's authoritarian takeover. The real heroic public servants of the story are people like Padme and Bail and Mon Mothra, who are not interested in playing politics and actually care about their constituents, unlike Anakin, who only cares about his attachments and self interest. Anakin's willingness to overthrow the Emperor is driven by his own self interest and desire for power rather than a genuine desire to do what is right. And this is reflected in his conversation with Padme in episode 2. The prequel trilogy, particularly Revenge of the Sith, serves as a cautionary tale, especially for young people, about the dangers of emotional instability, obsessive attachment, and the importance of balancing emotions with reason. Like I said, these movies are very divisive. Some people think that the prequel trilogy completely missed the point on what the original trilogy was trying to establish. Other people consider episode 3 as Star Wars in its truest form, just as Lucas envisioned, with strong Kurosawa influences, heightened melodrama, and a grand emotional weight that feels like the end, making it a space opera. The film explores the rise of fascism and how to combat and eventually destroy it, which is a testament to George Lucas's ethos in the franchise. And it's admirable that he treated the fall of democracy as a horrifying and hopeless collapse, because without it, we don't get the impact of A New Hope and the eventual return of the Jedi. I believe that George Lucas spoke from the heart in Revenge of the Sith, going against the grain and enduring criticism for the sake of his vision. He had a story to tell, and come hell or high water, he was going to tell it. He worked hard to make each one of these movies different, with unique planets and spaceships and situations and stories, each one having its own tone, but sitting within the context of this larger narrative. This trilogy has some of the most effective sequences and stories in all of Star Wars, including the Liberty Dies sequence, which is enhanced by John Williams' score and Lucas's cross-cutting between scenes, creating a sense of melancholy and hopelessness. His commentary on the world and its potential downfall is still relevant today. His fears of democracy ending are depicted on the screen, but they're also being depicted on the world screen, on the world stage, on a daily basis. The film blends digital characters and real humans in a beautiful way that allows you to sit in the context of a sci-fi epic, a story being told, but still involves real people that very well could be enduring all of this even today. Prequel Trilogy is a psychological and political autopsy and examination. It dissects how institutions fail. It dissects how individuals break. And it dissects how evil takes root, not through chaos, but through control. It's not just a space opera, it's a warning. The politics expose the system, the psychology reveals the soul. All right, that's it. That's all. That's a wrap. Let me know which one of the prequel trilogy is your favorite. And if you enjoyed this psychological and philosophical look at these series of movies, and let me know what else you want to see me tackle from this lens. That's it. Hopefully, you enjoyed it. Hopefully, you'll go back and watch this series again through a different set of eyes, because even though I grew up on the original trilogy, I have come to find a soft spot for this series because it is a warning, because it is a look into what is possible. Until next time, peace.